Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Utah FilmPod. You just got two of us this time. This is Josh Terry. I will be your host, and I will be co-hosted by Mr. Mark LaRocco, back in the chair, enjoying the end of summer. But once again, we are one Danny short. She's got some stuff going on and had to step aside for this episode, so we will look forward to her rejoining us shortly. In fact, I think she's going to have some news when she does come back, something maybe we'll kind of touch on, hint on a little bit later on. But in the meantime, Mark, it's August. I mean, I know that you got that traditional full-time job thing going on, and so maybe August isn't what it is for us who are kind of tied to the whole school thing. But I don't know.
Yeah.
How's the end of summer treating you?
I mean, the end of summer has been fine. We get to put the kids back in school, so that's always a nice time.
Right.
And I've started a new tradition just this year where I take the day off work the day before school starts to kind of hang out with the kids and
that's fun.
Spend one final summer day just with them all day. So we had fun. That was last Tuesday because they started on Wednesday. So yeah, we're in it now. We're in school. And
so do you guys do the now honored tradition of photographing each of your children on the doorstep on their first day of school and posting it to Facebook? Because I didn't notice. If
Holly does that.
I might have missed it.
I don't think she did the one where you make a sign with little letters. I know we've done that in the past, but I don't think we did that this time. It was just a picture of them, the my three oldest boys separately and then all together, and they're in 5th, 3rd, and 2nd grades. So yeah, she didn't go so far as to do a sign. And yeah.
Nice. Oh, I have always had, especially as a kid and now a little bit as an adult as well, since I'm working in the education field. But I've always kind of had these mixed feelings about August because technically it's a summer month, right? And so when you get to August, technically you're still in summer vacation, but it's not a complete month, right? At least, I mean, because I know that some districts in different places won't start school until like after Labor Day, but growing up and as far as I know now, I think everybody's pretty much starting like the last week of August or last week and a half before August ends. And so I always kind of felt like, now that August is here, even though it's still maybe like 3 weeks away, the specter of school is still kind of looming. And so I don't get to enjoy the idea that August is like this complete month of a break and of course, when I'm teaching summer school, it doesn't really matter, but still.
But even for regular school, I saw some people on Facebook. I think one of Holly's friends in Arizona, they started on August 1st or 2nd.
Really?
They started very early. Yeah.
That's awful.
Most of the Utah people, it's like the 17th, 18th, around there. Some of them are later, like 23rd, 24th. But yeah, normally it's in that the teens of August, the ides of August.
I'm not going to start my classes until Monday the 29th.
Oh.
So we're pretty late. Weber State's schedule seems to be a little bit different in a lot of ways because our spring break always seems to come quite early. Because whenever I'm taken off out of town during spring break, it just feels like it's barely the beginning of March, which is fine because that means there's less crowds and stuff. But at the same time, that also means that summer movie season, all that kind of traditional stuff is wrapping up, and we talked before about the idea that there's not a whole lot of really pressing releases that are out there to get excited about, and unfortunately, a couple of the movies that we would normally cover, they didn't actually have press screenings for them, and so Bullet Train I know was one that I was kind of curious about, and they didn't have a press screening for that one, and they also didn't cover Beast in Utah for the press critics, and so that one I have not seen. And of course, I realize I have to be completely transparent here and say that I obviously could go and see them once they're released, but my motivation, let's just say there are a lot of interlocking. There's a lot of complex factors here, namely the fact that I've been wrapping up a summer semester and just got back from a week-long trip just to kind of enjoy the break. But in terms of the new releases, not a whole lot to cover or to talk about.
It's kind of a doldrums right now, surprisingly, because Top Gun sort of like what Spider-Man, in what's that one called? No Way Home in December, sort
Yeah.
of reignited the box office in December. Top Gun did that in May, all the way through June and July. And Doctor Strange 2 and Thor and a few other
Mm-hmm.
movies did well, like the Batman, throughout the year. But like Top Gun is far and away the money winner this year.
Sure.
And
At least
but
until
then
Avatar, right?
Avatar and Wakanda. Yeah, we'll see. So like, but I heard the other day, or maybe it was today, that we are in a period of time all the way from basically the end of July until possibly October, where we won't see any single movie make 25 million at the box office in any
Yeah.
weekend. There's just going to be
Yeah.
a lot of little smaller releases that aren't going to excite too many people. So
That
yeah, I
wouldn't
mean,
surprise me. That
yeah.
wouldn't surprise me because, and like we've said, I mean, I think that that's more or less kind of traditional. I mean, well, not traditional in the sense of a tradition, but just typically the pattern is, especially in the last, I don't know, say 10, 15 years, as a lot of the big
Hmm.
Marvel movies have been released like even in April, right? It seems like the summer, there's such a jump on the summer movie season that it's really more of April, May, June
Hmm.
more than June, July, August. And so I think that we've kind of gotten away from the idea that there's going to be anything substantial unless it's kind of a sleeper hit that's going to come
Yeah.
between now and, like you say, between now and the
It,
holidays.
right. It would have to be like an unexpected hit,
Yeah.
like Dragon Ball Super Hero or
Right.
whatever it's called
Right.
that just made $20 million.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but I mean, as far as just from this time period where there's not a single movie, even a movie that's already come out, like say in July or June, that's continuing to have a great late summer
Mm-hmm.
surge. I think I heard the last time that this happened was in 2007. So
Oh wow.
normally there's at least one or two movies that kind of rise above the rest,
Mm-hmm.
and have some good box office receipts. But that's also, who knows? I mean, we're still recording in August. Something could come out in September that'll just
Sure.
you know
Well,
that'll
I
do
mean,
well.
for the sake of giving people some options, uh, last night while I was in a hotel in Twin Falls, I took a trip up the Oregon coast and
Hmm.
was on my way back over the last couple days, and I decided to pop on Netflix on my laptop and see what was going on. And I finally decided to break down and see this. It's called The Day Shift. I
Hmm.
believe it's the number one download, number one movie on Netflix right now. It's been out for a couple of weeks, but I just hadn't quite caught my eye, and I decided to give it a whirl last night. And so it was actually kind of fun. It's kind of this. I mean, there's definitely kind of a campy, kind of a B movie vibe about it. It's essentially an action vampire horror comedy. Jamie Foxx plays a vampire hunter, and his day job cover is as a pool cleaner, and but what he's really doing is he's tracking down vampires in Southern California, and so it's the day shift is he's trying to hunt vampires during the day, and it's just kind of this goofy kind of fun action horror. Like because it's vampires, I feel like I need to say horror, but it's really not a scary movie at all. It's really more just kind of fun, and there's some kind of crazy action, and there's a lot of stunts and stuff, because whenever he confronts the vampires are kind of bouncing off the walls and doing all kinds of weird bendy calisthenics and all this kind of stuff. But no, it was kind of a pleasant surprise. Like I wouldn't put it up there as any kind of a great movie, but in terms of just something kind of fun if you want to look for something new. Now, because of the nature of the subject matter, there's a little bit of R-rated profanity, but mostly it would draw an R rating for the violence, which is how to describe it. It's graphic, but it's also kind of cartoonish. Like it's very obviously not realistic because he's shooting and maiming vampires, and so it's very stylized, I guess is what I would say. But it would draw the R rating, and so people should be aware of that. But there's really nothing else in it in terms of sexual content or anything like that. And like I said, even the R rated language was pretty sparse. So
Yeah.
For those interested, and those of you who just have to have something new and something that might be kind of a campy fit for the end of summer, I was pleasantly surprised. It hasn't gotten the best reviews elsewhere, and so going into I think I was going into it I was a little am I gonna maybe I'll watch this for a half hour and see how it goes. But it was actually pretty fun, so I
Oh,
have to
okay.
give it credit. So just for the sake of giving you something new to think about, something new to consider. That one's out there. I don't know. Have you seen
I
anything
I I
recently?
haven't seen anything lately, but I do wanted to point out that the critic from the LA Times, he said that the Day Shift is more like 2022's best horror buddy cop cartel drama bounty hunter martial arts action comedy so far. So I
I
kind of
would I
like
would
that.
agree. I would agree.
He
I would
uses
completely
about
concur.
10 hyphens.
Actually, I think one of the most memorable kind of quirky things about it, and I don't know. I mean, I had heard it described as kind of a B movie before I watched it, and so maybe I kind of got this in the back of my head. But I noticed that so you got Jamie Foxx is playing the main, the main hero, and one of the other vampire hunters is played by Snoop Dogg, and then Dave Franco plays kind of Jamie Foxx's assistant union rep who kind of gets carried along for the ride, and those are really kind of the only recognizable actors. They're the rest of the cast, and this is what I found kind of interesting. I kept seeing people like actors in supporting roles who reminded me of other more famous actors. And so it
Mm.
almost kind of felt like, whereas if this was like kind of a big production Hollywood feature, they would have gotten the recognizable A-list or B-list actors. But
Hmm.
instead, because this is just kind of straight to Netflix and it's just meant to be kind of a campy, kind of a fun throwaway horror movie, horror comedy, jujitsu, whatever, right? Um, they wound up getting lookalikes, which I don't know. I maybe that might be kind of too rude to say. I don't want to be that dismissive of them. And the performances were fine. It's just I would see somebody, and I would think, huh, well that guy kind of looks like John Bernthal, but it's not John Bernthal. Or
Hmm.
that guy looks kind of like Jason Momoa, but it's not Jason Momoa. Or that guy kind of looks like Mads Mikkelsen, but it's not. And so you kind of get
Oh,
this,
okay.
now Peter Stormare is he's in it and he's
Mm.
great. And so, like I say,
Yeah.
there are a handful of recognizable people, but then more often than not, in fact, is it Zoe Dutch, the actress who was in the second Zombieland? She's been in a few other things. The main villain
Oh.
in Day Shift looks like her, and so
Oh,
in my
okay.
mind, I'm watching the movie and I'm like imagining the other actors because they just look so darn similar. Because normally I would never do this. This is like the first time I've ever kind of had this experience where I'm watching it and thinking, well, this is really strange because those two guys look like they're trying to look like Jason Momoa and John Bernthal, but they're not. They're other
Mm.
guys, but they look really. I can very easily picture them. And like I said, the same thing with kind of like the lead villain vampire and stuff. But anyway, uh, so maybe that's kind of something else you can do if you watch the movie is you can just kind of imagine, you can recast it in your mind as you watch it and watch all of the vampire gymnastic fights. But
Hmm. Yeah, I may have to check that one. Check it
yeah,
out.
now another movie that see, this one I feel bad about because this was just a very limited engagement, and so I can't recommend this as an option because the time is already passed. However, it was such a great experience. I can just certainly justify talking about it, but also I believe this is something that's going to be happening with other films in the very near future. So I think I might have mentioned to you, offline that about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago now, I took two of my nieces to see E.T. at
Mm.
so it's believe it or not, and anybody listening to this, if you're old enough, this will kind of blow your mind, but E.T. is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. It was
Yes.
1982 when that movie came out, and So as part of the 40th anniversary, they've been doing these special showings on IMAX. I don't believe, at least where I saw it, I believe it was just supposed to be like that day was the only special showing. So I don't think it's going to be a more lengthy engagement. But I do think that there are going to be other movies that are going to be doing this. In fact, I think you and I have already talked about Star Trek Two is going to be featured sometime next month.
Okay.
But holy cow, E.T. is a fantastic movie on its own, and probably one of my all-time favorite movies, if I'm really being honest with myself. But seeing it in IMAX was just incredible. It was
Oh.
such a cool experience, and very much enhanced by the fact that I was able to bring a couple of my nieces who had seen the movie before, but they were quite a bit younger, and so I think that even though it is a kids, it is a movie for children in many ways, I think that to really appreciate it, you have to be a little bit older, not
Hmm.
like 3 years old, right? And so
Yeah.
so seeing it with the two of them was just really, really wonderful. But then just kind of seeing it at that scope, because we saw it in an IMAX theater up here in Davis County, and at the Centerville Megaplex, Legacy Crossing, I think is what it's called. And yeah, just tried to find the best position possible, so it's
Hmm.
because I don't like to be way up at the back, especially when it's an IMAX, because I think IMAX is supposed to be kind of big and overwhelming and larger than life and all that kind of thing. And I mean, just you really recognize the power of the John Williams score, right? Referencing
Hmm.
kind of what we were talking about in, I can't remember if it was the last episode or the episode before that. It's been a little while, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the score was incredible. The performances, I mean, there have been a lot of movies that have made me think that the less dialogue you get from child actors, the better, as a general rule. But
Hmm.
in ET, they're great. Henry Thomas does such a great job as Elliot, and then so if you remember, they did a new version of ET a few years ago where they updated the character with a CGI.
Flashlight.
Well, just there was that too, right? They
Yeah.
changed the guns to flashlights because when the
Hmm.
when the cops or when the federal agents are chasing the kids, they didn't think that they should have guns. But they also there were several scenes where they actually changed ET into a CGI character, and all of this, as far as I could tell, this version was the straight up original version of ET. I didn't notice any
Oh.
changes or additions or alterations or anything, and it was great. It was
Yeah.
such a powerful, such an emotionally gripping movie. I mean, how long has it been since you've seen it?
So I love the movie too. We bought it probably 6, 7, 8 years ago because I wanted the kids to see it,
Yeah,
and they liked it. And I don't think it's one that they love, but they liked it and they were
yeah,
drawn in. I do remember one of my sons. I think he was too young. I think he was 3 or 4, and we
yeah.
asked him what he thought of ET, and his exact words were, "I hate the alien of it." And so Holly and I always kind of make fun of that. It's almost like an inside joke, I hate the alien of it. And so, yeah, it's good to be a little bit older, but it's kind of funny that well, I love that you took your nieces to it because
Mm.
one of Roger Ebert's most famous reviews, I think, is his review of E.T. that he wrote to his two grandkids
Mm.
that were 4 and 7 when they saw it. So I think he did a normal review in '82, and then later when he added it to his great movies collection, he wrote a
Oh,
unique
okay.
kind of creative review that was like a letter to his grandkids. And he had seen the movie so many times, he kind of said, I kept one eye on the screen and one eye on them and watched their reactions to certain scenes and how they saw everything the way a child would see it. And that's how the movie is. Like, the movie is largely from the point of view either
Right.
from E.T. or Elliot, which sounds like E.T. Elliot
Hmm.
is the closest name you can get to E.T. And like, and it really is. I mean, it's interesting because I think one of the brilliant sort of aspects of the movie is it really is kind of for kids and from a kid's point of view.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's such great filmmaking. Anybody of any age, would enjoy it. But so much of it is kind of like, how would a kid experience this of having, an encounter with an alien and hiding it from your parents and then befriending it? And, so many of the scenes are not involving adults.
With an important point though.
Yeah.
It's for kids from the point of view of kids, but it's not dumbed down.
Right.
And that's something that drives me crazy, because there are a lot of times I've come across movies, and we don't have to get into all the details, but and then like if they have, just scatological humor or just kind of, stupid jokes and stuff.
Yeah.
The excuse is, oh, well, it's for kids. It's not for adults. It's for kids, and kids laugh at that. And that's not E.T. E.T.
Right.
and you're, because you're right, that the POV is so cool and so effective in this movie, right? Because you really watch it, and I mean they do about everything short of having all the adults speak like Charlie Brown adult characters, right? And so, but I love how, even though they're doing that, and even though they're making the conscious decision to present it that way, they're not dumbing it down either, because I think there's a tendency to do that sometimes, and I think it undermines, because, oh my gosh, not that every movie has to be as good as E.T., but holy cow, it's just so effective. And just, I mean, I would look at the little details, how the main guy, who you basically think is the bad guy just because he's kind of presented in this very mysterious manner, but for most of the movie, all you see is the key ring on his belt, right? And every time you see his character, there's kind of this close-up shot, or you can hear them jingling. Sometimes you just hear them jingling as he's walking around, and that's just kind of the signifier, right? And that's just kind of like this cool little filmmaking move that says that, okay, well, I'm just going to establish this character, and you're not going to know much about him, but you're always going to know it's him, and you're always going to know he's around.
Yeah.
And so there's just like lots of little stuff like that.
I love it. The other reason I love it is, obviously what happens is, in a way, when you almost don't show an adult's face as much, or don't show things from their point of view, or have big, long, lengthy discussions of the adults, you're less likely to empathize with them. It's almost like you dehumanize them a little bit. You're really focused on the kids and the alien, and then of course this psychic connection that the ET has with Elliot.
Yeah.
And the mother ends up, obviously being on his side, and but like even the conversations you hear, sometimes it's snippets of conversations about what they're going to do or why they're looking for ET. You don't really get the full story a lot of times.
Yeah.
And so I love the details of the whole opening scene, where you just they have the camera low on like the headlights coming in, or they'll show the flashlight, or the Spielberg is kind of famous for this, but like the scene in the forest where all you see are everyone's flashlights for a few seconds, it's really cool. I love it.
That was that stuff was just so many little things that were fun, and kind of like you said, I mean, I was also kind of paying attention to my nieces, and it's like, okay, are they going to go for this? Because I know that kind of like you said with your son, I think some people, whenever I've come across somebody who didn't really like the movie that much, it was because they couldn't really buy into E.T. as the alien, right? Just because they didn't think it was realistic, or just thought he looks too weird or something. And and this kind of leads into my next point, but one of my nieces actually said afterwards, and I love that she said this, but she just said, like, oh, it was like I was crying the whole time, just that it was, because it's such an emotional, really, really dramatic experience.
I mean, and it's kind of the Disney-fied character that is adorable. I mean, he's kind of, I guess he's kind of ugly, to be honest. But when you look at E.T., he's got the big eyes.
Right.
He's short and kind of stumpy and stocky, and he's got the skinny neck, and it almost reminds you of like the robot from Short Circuit, number 5, or even Wall-E. He's almost kind of like a robot, but he's an organic alien creature, right?
Yeah.
But it's somebody that it's not an ugly in the sense of like menacing or threatening,
right?
Or
because of the eyes.
Hostile.
I think that's really the big.
The
point.
Eyes really help. The big eyes really help. I mean,
and for an animated, animatronic, whatever it was, it's very effective. Like even watching the old, 40-year-old effects. Obviously, it's not. I mean, in some ways, I think it looks better than it would if they did it now, because if they did it now, they would just make it a CGI thing straight out, and it would probably look good, but you would be conscious of the idea that it was a CGI creation. Whereas in this movie, even if it's not exactly like bouncing off the walls and stuff, it's still pretty darn, articulated.
Yeah.
The way that it moves, especially around the face. But this is my last. So, do you remember seeing it as a kid?
Yeah, I do. I saw it. I mean, I probably saw it not too long after it came out. I mean, it became the number one movie of all time
Yeah.
for a
Oh yeah.
short while. I think until Jurassic Park, but it would have been number one or number two for like 10 years.
Yeah.
And so I mean, and it was very well marketed. I remember
Right.
reading once about the marketing. Like one of the critics said there was virtually not a man, woman, nor child alive that didn't know of E.T.'s coming before it came out in May. And it actually was released in Cannes first,
Hmm.
and then it had an official release in like late May or something of 1982. So everyone knew about it. Spielberg was already a hit maker by then.
Yeah. Oh sure.
He'd already had Jaws, Close Encounters, Raiders of the Lost Ark. So it was already like an event. He was an
Yeah.
event filmmaker. But I don't remember what age I saw. I'm guessing I would have been 6, 7, 8, pretty young.
Yeah.
It
No,
was
I.
yeah. Yeah, I came out in 82. I would have been almost 5. So I probably
Okay.
saw it not too long after that.
Yeah. I have pretty clear. So, how to put this? I don't have memories of physically watching it. Like there are some movies where I remember actually being in the theater watching it. Like I actually have specific
Hmm.
memories of watching Raiders of the Lost Ark and being turned around in the chair to avoid the face melting scenes, right? And which
Yeah.
we talked about before.
Yeah.
But with ET, what I remember was rejecting the film.
Mm.
And so I was, probably about the same age. I must have been somewhere 6 plus or minus at the time when I saw it. And as I've thought about this, and of course rewatching it over the years, and especially just a couple weeks ago, I've come to some interesting conclusions with it. And I think that what happened, because I remember when I watched it the first time, the reason I rejected it was because I thought, oh, that's a kids movie. This is for kids, right? And I grew up, I did not watch, other than kind of the periodic re-release in theaters for a month here or there. I didn't watch a lot of Disney movies. I didn't watch, I think if Snow White was playing, we'd go see that as a family. But man, I grew up watching the Star Wars movies and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and not necessarily adult movies. Like I wasn't watching a bunch of, I wasn't watching Terminator or Predator or anything like that. But I was definitely watching more kind of grown up type action
Mm.
movies from a young age. And so I think when I saw E.T., I think part of it was I just thought, oh well, this is obviously for little kids because it's cute, and Elliot's just this little boy, and I think it was actually, if I remember correctly, I think I was actually the age of Gertie, of Drew Barrymore. I mean, I saw the movie through Elliot's eyes, which was intentional, like you mentioned, but I think I was actually about the age of Drew Barrymore, and and I just kind of perceived that, oh well, this movie's for kids. But I think even deeper than that, and this is what I find interesting now, is that I think one of the things that I rejected was that it was so emotional. Like it is such a the emotional highs and lows of that movie, and just kind of like I say when my niece described it, just like I was just crying the whole time because it's this really very powerful. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't imagine anybody's gonna be listening to this who isn't already familiar or hasn't seen the movie, but towards the end of the movie, there's a lot of kind of life and death type stuff
Hmm.
going on, and these really really sweeping changes in the plot and the story, and really really touching moments that are just you combine them with that John Williams score, and as much as I love the Star Wars movies and Raiders of the Lost Ark and all this other stuff, I don't think that they're quite at the same level as ET in terms of really making that kind of a kind of an emotional, realistic
Hmm.
connection, right? Because I mean, I think the most dramatic of the Star Wars finales has got to be Empire Strikes Back, right? I mean, that's the most melodramatic, kind of the painful thing. But even that is okay. Well, this is outer space, and these are imaginary characters. Where ET just feels so real, right, and so
Hmm.
genuine. And I hadn't really thought about that too much until I just watched it this last time, but I kind of wonder if little 6-year-old Josh was like, this movie's making
Too
me get
cynical.
the feels and I don't like it.
Oh, I know. I'm
Because
surprised that you'd be thinking
I'm
as a
tough. I'm a
6-year-old,
big kid. I'm a big boy.
this movie's for kids, and you're 6.
Well,
Like,
no, but that's
just,
it. No, and that's really what it was. That's genuinely how I felt, was
yeah.
that this is for little kids. This is not, when's the next Indiana Jones movie? I want to see that. But
Yeah.
that's
I
why I said
guess
I don't remember. I don't know if
it
if you remembered
it
anything like that when you saw it as a
no.
child. But
Some of my specific memories, and it's almost like, and maybe I was just disturbed because by this time I had identified with E.T. as a character that was worth saving and was a friend to Elliot. But I think it's when they bike up into the, I remember E.T. being like in a stream, like half dead.
yeah,
And they have to find him and wrap him up and take him
right.
home. And I remember just feeling so bad for him, like
Oh,
he
it's
doesn't deserve this.
terrifying.
And
Yeah,
it's horrible. Yeah, and he's
because his skin's all turning white.
skin
It's
is
kind of
turning
normally that kind of
white.
brown orange,
Right.
and it's
He's
turning
got
white.
this pallor, and he looks like he's not going to last. And then
Yeah.
I can't remember if it's later in the movie, but when both E.T. and Elliot are struggling, and hooked up to those machines and can barely breathe. And I think it's probably pretty traumatic for any kid,
Yeah.
to watch that. And it's not, and luckily things turn out fine, so it's not like a horrible ending or anything that really probably a kid shouldn't see in that kind of a movie. But yeah, it was definitely a more emotionally charged movie than just the fun kind of run and gun style of a Raiders of the Lost Ark type of
Yeah,
movie.
right, right.
So,
Well, and I think that I know that part of, I'm not sure to what extent, but I know that part of either the inspiration behind or one of the kind of the themes of the movie is coping with divorce. And that's, now this was not the one. So as I understand it, the story goes that Temple of Doom was written and produced while Spielberg and George Lucas were both going through divorces. But I think E.T. was meant to be kind of a response to the theme and the idea of divorce. And of course, if you watch it as an adult, it's much more clear that the mom is dealing with the recent separation from the dad, and the dad's off with some new girlfriend in Mexico, and so there are those little beats, those little things that happen in the background that I don't think you pay as close attention to when you're a kid. But
yeah,
there's just some real heavy kind of real world themes in there, and I think it makes the movie really good.
It definitely does. I remember the scene where I think where Elliot talks about the dad being off in Mexico with the girlfriend, and it upsets the mom so much that the brother gets mad at Elliot.
Yeah.
He's sort of the surrogate father. He's the protector for the mom now, and because the dad apparently has been gone for a while. Yeah. And this is something that Spielberg dealt with early on in his movies and kind of shied away from it later. In fact, I've heard him speak about how, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which came out 5 years before E.T.,
right.
His dad just kind of goes crazy and leaves his family to go pursue this weird vision he's having, right? And he kind of said, Spielberg, when he looked back on the movie, he said, I'd never make a movie like that again. I'd never make a movie where a dad leaves his family.
Yeah.
And so E.T. is interesting because it's all about, even though it does deal with that difficult theme of divorce, it actually is more about reconnections, and even with E.T. and his own mom, right? Like, I mean, there's this connection there by the end of the movie, and E.T. Elliot gets closer to his mom throughout the whole ordeal, and so, but yeah, it does deal with that, and maybe as a kid, I don't know, maybe some kids who were going through a divorce would notice that more watching the movie. I didn't remember that when I first saw the movie. It was more focused on this E.T. How would Elliot and E.T. deal with each other,
Right.
But yeah,
nice.
It's great. I recommend it. I mean, it's a 4-star movie for me. And
well, no, and like I said, I think that while watching it the other day, I think I officially said, okay, well, this has got to be in my, I don't know if it's top 10, top 20, whatever, but it's up there.
It's up there.
It's a big one now.
Well, if we ever do a Spielberg list, you could probably rank it on where you think it goes. Because I think probably both of us have seen, we're not completists, but we've probably seen most or
Mm-hmm.
close to most of the Spielberg
Yeah.
movies. So
Yeah. I think there's only a couple that I
um,
haven't.
yeah,
We'll have
I
to do that.
that would be fun. Yeah. I
Nice.
mean, listeners of this podcast would probably know what my number one is, but I don't know what would be like two and three and four.
Right. Right.
So
Well,
yeah.
so anyway, even if you can't make it to see it in IMAX for the 40th anniversary, I think both of it sounds like both of us would definitely recommend a viewing at home or another time. And
Hmm.
then, like I said, I think that they're going to be doing this for some other movies, at least Wrath of Khan. So maybe we can cover some of that. In the meantime, uh, I think it's high time that we put a little Utah in the Utah Film Pod, and so I thought we'd bring back a feature that Danny and I had kind of tinkered around with a little bit earlier, and I think we kind of got away from just for the sake of other subjects.
Mm.
But we want to feature one Utah related film, and I think this can be interpreted a lot of different ways. And it could be produced or made by somebody from Utah. It could be made in Utah. It could be about Utah. Just some kind of a clear Utah connection. And so Mark, what did you come up with for the Utah feature for this episode of the Utah Film Pod?
Okay, so I'm gonna do a little bait and switch here. If I were
Oh,
to tell you about a movie that is set in a high school, at least partially, and was filmed in Utah, what would be the first movie that would come to your mind?
well, I think one of the biggest ones right now would probably be High School Musical, right? Because weren't
Oh,
all those
okay.
filmed there?
You're right. You're right. I thought
Yeah,
I forgot to add this. 1980s. Okay.
1980s.
Right.
Yeah,
So the movie that I was thinking of, and this is not the one I'm going to feature, but this is what most people think of, is Footloose. Um,
oh,
and
yeah, right.
right, and so that's one that is kind of the more commonly known 1980s teen, high
Yeah.
school movie that was shot in Utah. The one that I want to talk about today, because it's just sort of an underrated gem, not very many people know about it. I brought it up to people before, and a lot of people haven't even heard of it. It's called 3 O'clock High.
Okay.
It came out in 1987. It was filmed in Ogden High School, whereas I believe Footloose was at Lehigh High School.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's an interesting movie because it doesn't really have any stars in it. There's some supporting characters like Philip Baker Hall and Jeffrey Tambor, who are even Paul Feig, who's a film director now, is kind of
Okay.
a has just he's kind of an extra, but um, it's really funny. And what kind of got me thinking about this movie again is I was listening to a pod a while ago where uh, Quentin Tarantino was talking about movies from the 80s that he liked, and they were specifically doing 1987. And he brought this movie up, which just kind of surprised me, just kind of shocked me out of the blue. Because he hates the 80s. He often says it's like the worst decade for movies and is not a fan. But this was one that he liked because it kind of delivered on its premise. And I'll tell you the plot. What happens is there's this guy who's kind of a shy, wimpy high schooler who works for the school newspaper. His name's Jerry. He goes to school, and the rumor is there's a new kid in school who's kind of a juvenile delinquent who was transferred from another high school, and this is his first day in the school that he's going to. Which I can't remember what it's called, but it's set, it's in Ogden High School is where they filmed it. And so his journalism professor says, "Hey, why don't you go meet the new kid and do a story on him, do a feature on him?" So he said, "Okay." And so he meets with the guy, and through a series of kind of blundering misstatements, completely offends him. And he is a bully. He's a big, tough, kind of has that long hair, almost shoulder length hair, and and the guy is so offended that he basically Jerry withdraws the request to like write up a feature on him, and he like touches him on the shoulder and says like, "Let's forget this whole thing." And once he touches him, the guy just goes berserk, and he says, "Nobody touches me. We're gonna fight 3 o'clock today. We're gonna have a fight." And so the whole rest of the movie, and it's weird because it is a comedy. I mean, that's kind of its first thing, but it's a little bit of some darker elements in some of the little ways that Jerry tries to get out of this fight. Things that he does, where he like will steal money, try to enlist someone else to beat the guy up, try to frame him. I mean, he does all these things that whatever you could do in 6 hours that's somewhat believable in an 80s high school movie to try to get out of fighting this bully. And I don't want to spoil it, but it does deliver on the title. You know, the fight is not avoided, and so it's funny, and it's kind of weird at moments. I remember watching it with my friend Chad, and he just laughed because so many of the things are just like that keep happening, just almost bad luck, coincidences and turns of events that keep happening to Jerry, or it make he's a really kind of sad sack character, and then he kind of finds his strength and finds some courage. But it's pretty funny, and it's really well done. It's kind of a movie that didn't do well when it came out. Critically, it didn't do well.
Yeah.
Ebert, it was a 1-star review. I didn't know that until today because I looked. I was like, I wonder what Ebert thought. A lot of critics didn't like it, and it got sort of reappraised later and sort of reappreciated to a higher degree than it was when it came out. But I mean, it cost $5 million to make, and it didn't even make that. I think it made $3.5 million at the box office. So it just never became it never found traction.
Yeah.
The director didn't go on to do a lot of stuff. He ended up directing music videos for most of his career, like Rattle and Hum, and a lot of famous music videos, YouTube movie. Did a couple other feature movies, but maybe one or two others. And the main actor in it was his only starring role. He was one of the bullies in Back to the Future.
Oh, okay.
The guy with the 3D glasses. He was in a couple other movies like that. I don't know if you remember. He hardly has any lines in Back to the Future. He's also in Back to the Future too. But he's the main. He's Jerry Mitchell.
Okay.
The main character. It's kind of funny. I wonder if Jerry. It's probably a coincidence, but I was thinking of Jerry Lundegaard from Fargo, who's also sort of a wimpy character that tries to do things he probably shouldn't. But anyway, but it's like it's great.
Interesting allusions there, or some.
Yeah, so the Utah
parallels.
connection is really the Ogden High School setting. It's
which is great. I mean, if you haven't seen Ogden High,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great looking building. It's kind of one of those old kind of classic. I assume it still looks that way. Too many high schools, including my own, have been, they've built additions on, and they kind of changed things substantially. But last time I drove by Ogden High, it looks very Gothic, right? I mean, it's just kind of cool, and it's got little spires and
It's
I can see why they chose it. I haven't seen the movie, but I can see why they chose that location.
I don't even know what it's on, but you should get a chance to see it. It's funny when you said it's high time to put a little Utah in the Utah FilmPod. I was thinking of the movie High Noon. Maybe when you said high time, I thought High Noon, and 3 o'clock high and High Noon have similarities.
I was going to say, I'm sure that's what they were alluding to with it.
I think they kind of were. I mean, High Noon, the main character, of course, is much more brave, and he's almost looking forward in a reluctant way, but he's going to defend the town and try to enlist the help of others who just won't help him. But it's really a similar movie in the sense that from the very beginning of the movie, you know that it's building toward this climactic showdown.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen. That's kind of the real suspense, is really what's going to happen to get there between now and then, and how does it influence the final event. And that's of course a classic. I remember watching that in a film class I took at Utah State, and that came out in 1952 and was immediately inducted into the library. I think it was the Library of Congress started their film preservation, and that was one of the first 25 movies shown. So I'm not trying to say 3 o'clock high is anything
on
close
par.
to on par with High Noon, but there's definitely some similarities, right?
Nice. No, that's cool. I've heard it. I've heard that movie referenced multiple times, and so I think that needs to be one that I should probably take a look at that one. So good
which
choice.
Which one, High Noon or 3 o'clock?
Actually, both. Honestly, in fact, I keep thinking. I know that there's an endless number of options that we could use for kind of themed episodes, but at some point I would love to get into Westerns, just because I don't feel like I have seen a lot of Westerns, but I've seen enough to really love certain things about the genre and some real. I mean, some of my favorite movies and some of my kind of most fond movie watching memories, are I think there's something really special about the Western genre. And of course, I think that a big part of that it ties into the fact that I have now spent a lot of recent years visiting Monument Valley, which has such
Mm. Oh yeah.
specific ties to the Western genre and John Wayne and all that kind of thing. So yeah, maybe we'll have to put that one on the list.
We
And
we
in
should.
preparation, I'll have to watch High Noon.
It's funny you mentioned that about being interested in westerns because I just saw for the first time The Treasure of the Sierra Madre last week.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
it was last week, and it was a movie I bought like a year ago. So I had the DVD, and I'd always kind of wanted to see it. But then recently, I started reading about how Paul Thomas Anderson was so influenced by that movie while making There Will Be Blood, and even Daniel
Okay.
Day Lewis
Oh wow.
basing a little bit of his character on that movie. And it's not as similar as I thought when I watched it. I can see where there is the influence, but it's
Yeah.
not really that similar of a plot line.
Mm.
I mean, it's about greed in the American West and what people will do for money and how they'll start to be distrustful and almost go insane with distrust of others to hold on to their money. And so there are a lot of similar themes in it, but this is it's a great one. It's a Humphrey Bogart is the main
Right.
character
It's
in it.
that's another
And
one that I've heard of but haven't seen.
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
he it's interesting because it's one of those where I think it's one of the all-time great performances, and he wasn't even nominated for it.
Oh really?
Yeah, I kind of feel like he's almost like a Harrison Ford type character where
Okay.
they're really in lots of great performances, lots of great movies, but
Yeah.
really not recognized, um, for their acting. Like Harrison Ford's almost never nominated, and I don't think he cares at all, like one bit. You
No,
get the
probably
feeling,
not. Yeah.
but Humphrey Bogart did end up winning for the African Queen, but I mean it took almost to the end of his career. But yeah, it was.
Well,
I would recommend that, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
okay. I mean, I've seen Casablanca. I don't think I've seen Maltese Falcon,
Hmm.
but no. And just on that note, I have to admit that one of my deep and abiding fears as a movie critic, working in any kind of a official or professional capacity, is that I fully understand and have seen and have experienced personally how the first time you see something, a lot of times people don't appreciate it, and the first
Hmm.
time you see somebody's work a few different times, you don't appreciate it. Just like with the way you're describing with Bogart and with Harrison Ford, sometimes it's easier to appreciate them more in retrospect than in the moment.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, like that's one of the things that drives me crazy is this feeling like, oh, I don't want to be one of those guys that just craps all over some movie that turns out to be a classic, and then 20 years down
Hmm.
the road, I realize how important it was and how good it was, and I don't know,
Yeah.
because I mean, there are definitely movies like I don't know that I've ever flipped the switch entirely from oh this is a crap movie to this is really great, but I've
Yeah.
definitely appreciated movies more upon a second watch or seeing them a little more down the line. And there have also been movies that I was really blown away by initially that once the dust settled, I kind of realized, yeah, I guess that wasn't really that up to much. It kind of it
Yeah.
what the gloss kind of wears off, and you realize that there was a lot of flash and a lot of sizzle, but not a whole lot of substance. But
Yeah. Sometimes you can get caught up in the craze and then look back and be like, wow, we really were, everyone was excited about this movie and it was just okay, maybe.
yeah,
Or you
yeah,
just missed something. And I'm usually, I guess I'm not afraid to, if there's a movie I just doesn't speak to me, and it does speak to everyone else, maybe I'll give it a second chance, but I don't really care to. Like that's how I am with The Big Lebowski or
yeah.
The
You
Grand
mentioned
Budapest Hotel, or there's certain movies even by great directors, like some of the greatest directors living
hmm
today, where I'm like, well, it definitely doesn't live up to their other works. I mean, maybe it's still better than the average movie or something, but
well, so okay, so here's a
yeah.
question for you. So, can you think of any specific movies? And you've already mentioned like Lebowski and stuff, but can you think of a specific movie that is generally held to be a great movie or just beloved, celebrated, whatever you want to call it, but you just don't buy it or you just don't get it, you don't agree, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, are there any movies that you just, people could tell me this is this fantastic movie. I've tried to see it a few times. I just don't buy it. I just don't get it. I don't, I don't know what I'm missing here. Have you ever had that experience?
Yeah, I'd have to think of one. Like, what do you have one in
I
mind
was going to say
that does
I
that
can
one for
give you
you?
an example and then maybe give you kind of a chance to think of it rather than just kind of put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Because like I remember hearing so much about Annie Hall, and I'm
Mm.
just by way of introduction, I'm a generally pretty big Woody Allen fan. I especially love his humorous prose from kind of early in his career when he was writing essays for the New Yorker. In high school, I really got into reading a lot of his stuff, and his humor style, his written humor style is really incredible and reflected in kind of his earlier movies like Bananas and Take the Money and Run. But I kept hearing about how great Annie Hall was, and I think it was the movie that actually won Best Picture the year that Star Wars came out, and so this kind of
Hmm.
how come Star Wars got beat, and but the first two or three times I tried to watch Annie Hall, I just kind of thought, man, I really like a lot of Woody Allen's movies, but at this one I'm just not. I just don't see the what's the
Yeah.
big deal, and it wasn't that it was bad or that I just thought that, oh, this is terrible, I can't believe this. I just wasn't grasping what it was about the movie that separated it from his others and made it such a celebrated and beloved, because I would probably, I don't know, I mean, I'm just thinking about this now, so it's just kind of on the top of my head, but I don't know how many other Woody Allen movies would be rated above Annie Hall. Like, that's the one that really seems to be the most celebrated.
Hmm.
And it's definitely not my favorite Woody Allen movie. And like I said, I wouldn't call it a bad movie by any means, but it's one of the ones that I've had a tough time appreciating to the level that other people seem to appreciate it. And
Yeah.
and I don't know if that's something that's just me or if you've had kind of the similar experience. I mean, I
I
don't
did
want to be in
like.
agreement with everybody all the time. I don't want
Right.
to feel like I need to be in lockstep with everybody's opinion on stuff. But there are some times where you just kind of think, what am I missing here? Because I just don't feel like I'm seeing something that everybody seems to be seeing.
Yeah. For me, I don't know if I have enough Woody Allens to really talk about it. I've probably seen seven or eight or nine, and I I I remember liking it. And I think one thing I did like about it is he broke a lot of rules in that movie.
Hmm.
Like I remember him talking to the camera, like breaking the fourth wall
Yeah,
and just talking to the camera. And there's a little cartoon. There's the part where he's so Jewish, it shows him as if he's got like a yarmulke and earlocks, like at the family dinner. But it's sort of a fantasy scene
yeah,
for a
yeah.
second, and there's a cartoon, and there's certain things in there where it sort of weaves this love story throughout. um, I don't know. I almost feel like in some ways it's the quintessential Woody Allen. Like he's this neurotic, you know, kind of egotistical, but also self-loathing,
Hmm.
New Yorker who's funny, but also just you know finds problems in love, and I guess kind of later influenced a little bit George's character in Seinfeld. In fact, George talks about how when he read for the character, he thought he was doing Woody Allen. It took him into several seasons of Seinfeld to realize it was really Larry David, but he did. I remember watching a documentary or whatever where George is doing a Woody Allen impression as if he's auditioning for George in
Yeah,
Seinfeld. Or I mean, Jason
yeah.
Alexander's
Well,
doing the
and
impression,
I mean, I think those
but
early episodes, I think that's even a much
it's
more
it
clear
probably is.
connection, right?
Yeah,
I mean, as I
yeah,
recall, that first season of Seinfeld is almost kind of jarring because compared to what it became in
what
terms
it
of its
became.
rhythm and its pacing and just kind of the interpretation with all the interweaving subplots and stuff, that it's almost kind of stale to watch some of those early episodes because they're really just, I mean,
Right.
that's when the show really was about nothing, you know.
Yeah. But going back to Annie Hall, I liked it. I mean in terms of winning the Oscar for Best Picture, yeah, you could probably say it's overrated because it's probably all
Mhm.
the New York film critics that wanted to award it when you had Star Wars, and it seems like there was another big movie that came out that year, but maybe I'm just thinking of Star Wars. But yeah, so that's one. I think for me, I mean, as far as classic movies that are probably overrated or that I just don't
Just
love that much, I would say Chinatown is one.
okay.
I remember reading a lot about that. It's like Polanski's magnum opus. It's an important movie,
Uh-huh.
Jack Nicholson, and um, it was just okay. And
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe if I watched it again, I'd really love it.
We always
My
say that, right? Like maybe I need
I
to
don't
watch it
know.
one more time. Maybe I missed
But why
something.
not? Yeah, if you didn't like it, I mean, watch something new. And then
Yeah.
My Fair Lady is another one.
Okay. Okay.
I just saw that for the first time like a year or a year and a half ago with Holly because it was on Netflix, and I mean it has some good songs and some of the classic songs, but gosh, the relationship between Henry Higgins and what's her name, Eliza
Eliza
Doolittle,
Doolittle. Yeah.
he is just so verbally abusive to her. And I guess that's the way it was at the time. The
Yeah.
movie was 1963 and it's about seems like it was about the 20s or something.
Okay.
But I mean, by the end of the movie, he's almost blaming her for making her fall in love with him, and he's mad at himself, and he's like, it's just really weird. Like, there's a good 15 or 20-minute scene where he's just berating her, and she's kind of taking it, and then it kind of ends with them just standing there, and I guess supposedly they'd fallen in love by that time. And it was just weird. It was really weird. And so I don't know. Maybe I just didn't get it. But that was another Best Picture winner.
Okay.
Just like Annie Hall. Chinatown wasn't because it came out the same year as Godfather 2.
Oh.
And then also, I mean, this is almost too sacred to mention, but Citizen Kane,
Okay.
it's not like a great rewatchable for me. I mean, I think I appreciated all of the filmmaking innovation and technique that it
Yeah.
pioneered,
Right.
which is one reason why so many critics loved it. And it made the top greatest movie of all time on the Sight and Sound list that comes out every 10 years. And then finally, Vertigo overtook it.
Okay.
The Jimmy Stewart Hitchcock
Yeah.
movie from
Right.
1958. But I don't know. I did like Citizen Kane, and I'm like, there were so many things in it that were just groundbreaking, editing montages and things like that. But it's not like really a highly entertaining movie. And I
Yeah.
mean, it's 1941 too. I mean, sometimes when I talk to people about old movies, I'm like, hey, have you ever seen a movie from 30s or 40s? And it's like, oh, Wizard of Oz. Anything else? No.
Nope.
Like
Nope.
most people, most average moviegoers really haven't seen more than one or two movies before like 1955 or 60.
Or even.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe even later. I don't know.
Right. Right.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. No. And it's well, I guess depending on who you spoke to, it could be considered a classic. But this is more of kind of a local. I would put this more on a par with your experience with Big Lebowski, but I've I've never embraced the Princess Bride. I
Oh,
and unlike almost every one of my peers, I don't know that I've ever really come across anybody that I can remember who didn't like Princess Bride, and most of them just kind of it almost for a while I kind of had this mental short list of if you grew up in Utah in the 1980s, there were certain movies. There was a short list of movies that you were going to be familiar with and that you were going to love, right? And for a lot of people, it seems like Princess Bride's on that list. I would venture to say that I might enjoy it a lot more if I were to see it now, especially if I were to have kind of watch it with my nieces type thing. But I remember at the time just not really jiving with the comedy style of it. But I think the bigger problem was that because it was so well known and so beloved, it was also one of those movies that kids and people would quote to each other all the time, right?
yeah.
And so even though I hadn't seen the movie, I knew all of the big one-liners, right? And when all of your friends are always doing the one-liners and you haven't seen the movie, it gets a little annoying after a while. And so by the time I actually saw the movie, I think it kind of pulled the rug out from it a little bit. And I remember kind of, and maybe this is kind of similar to my rejection of ET, but I remember just kind of feeling like, oh, this is stupid. This is, well, people just shut up about this movie, right? And so as a consequence, I just never really embraced Princess Bride. And I remember feeling infinitely grateful that I managed to see Monty Python on the Holy Grail before my friends did, so that I didn't have to be inundated with a bunch of bad British accents as they would quote that one over and over, because that was one of the other ones that just constantly being quoted and referenced. And I think that if I had the similar experience, oh my gosh, my life would not be the same if I didn't have Monty Python in it. So I'm grateful that I didn't have the same experience. But yeah, so in fact, I think I actually mentioned to one of my nieces a while back, I said, hey, have you ever watched Princess Bride? And to my surprise, she was just kind of like, yeah, it was okay. Wouldn't really, I don't think she disliked it, but because I was going to say, if you haven't seen it, then maybe I should watch it with you, because I can kind of, how you have a different experience with a movie if you're with somebody who is seeing it for the first time, or is maybe more of kind of the target audience. You can kind of see it through their eyes. And so I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever wind up reclaiming that one, but Princess Bride, Annie Hall, I guess those are some of my weak spots.
I liked Princess Bride. I mean, I guess it's not a all-time beloved classic for me personally, but I remember liking it. I remember my theater experience of seeing that, and I guess I would have been around 10 or 11. That was probably a good age for it. And then I kind of feel like it became that almost Utah cultural zeitgeist movie that everyone quotes. And then maybe it was overtaken by Napoleon Dynamite, like in the 2000s. Because then Napoleon Dynamite was sort of that movie where everybody was quoting it and it was funny. And maybe there are kids now that are like, oh, Napoleon Dynamite, it's not, it's overrated. It's not that good,
Believe it or not, I loved Napoleon Dynamite so much when it first came out, and saw it a couple times in the theaters and all this, and I think I wound up getting the DVD. But and it came out like right around the time I finished at Utah State, so it was when we were. I don't think I actually reviewed it for the Statesman, but anyway, I got the sense like, okay, this is becoming kind of a popular thing, and I don't want to burn myself out on this. I don't want to ruin this movie by watching it too many times, and so I actually made a conscious decision not to watch it for a very long time, like over several years, just because I kind of wanted to preserve what I loved about it and what I enjoyed. And so, because you're right, it became this. There was very much a similar Princess Bride, Monty Python style quirky obsession, with it that I think can burn itself out if you hear a little too much of it and get a little too sick of it. But and that's a movie. We could have an interesting discussion about Napoleon Dynamite. Maybe when we have a little more time in an episode, because I really felt like, I remember this is just the one thing I'll say about it. I remember being really shocked and disappointed to read, although I guess I was half shocked and half not, because I remember reading the reviews in Entertainment Weekly, and they just despised it. They thought Napoleon Dynamite was the worst movie, and it was just kind of, their reviews were so pretentious and so kind of uppity critic, like the kind of stuff that gives critics bad names. And what I realized was, you guys really don't understand this movie. Like, you don't understand what makes this funny, and the reason is you didn't grow up in Utah and southeastern Idaho in the 1980s.
Right.
Because
exactly.
even though this isn't set in that time, that's what this movie's about, and that behavior and that weird kind of culture. I mean, even growing up in suburban, just north of Salt Lake, I wasn't in rural Idaho, but I felt like I knew that school and that student body and that experience. And I think that if you don't have that, an already bizarre movie is going to be that much more inaccessible and kind of confusing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think it's such a great the deadpan humor of it and just the little details he gets right. Because I did grow up in Logan. I grew up about 40 minutes south of Preston. We had tater tots for lunch. I mean, that's some
Yes,
people
well,
don't even know what
yeah.
those are. And I mean, I didn't ever put them in my
Those
pocket.
poor, de- depraved.
Well, I mean, you didn't have to live in Idaho to get tater tots for lunch, but I
No,
love that
I
it's in
had them.
Idaho
They
where
were
it's like,
great.
but
I
they're
never
just so
stuffed them in
many.
my pocket.
Right, that's what I said. Yeah, but there's so many little details that it's just like a knowing, like winking glance at his local audience, his
Sure.
Utah,
Oh
Idaho
yeah.
audience, and so I agree with you. I remember reading Ebert's review. I always bring him up. I probably need to stop. I used to like worship him, and it was a 1-star review. He didn't get it either. He hated it. It might have been 1.5, but I was no more than 1.5,
Okay.
and it's like, why are you crapping all over this little independent filmmaker's first film from Utah? A lot of critics, they're proud to like champion smaller films, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe by then it was a hit. So it's like, oh, whatever. I mean, it made like
Right.
$45 million and the budget was probably not even $1 million. I don't remember, but it
Uh,
was a very high profit margin movie. I mean, it led to him being able to make a bunch of big budget movies like
yeah.
Masterminds, which I watched again a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was that was a great one.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Well,
I
look
was
at that.
sorry.
Look at that. We got a twofer. We have two
Okay,
featured Utah movies in this episode, not just one.
yes, and by the way, before you, but anyone is dissuaded from seeing a Woody Allen movie, I agree. If you're not going to see, if Annie Hall is not your taste, I recommend Midnight in Paris.
Oh my
That's a
gosh.
great movie.
Oh,
I love Crimes and Misdemeanors. Even though almost half of Woody Allen movies are about adultery, or maybe most of them, that's another one. It's
there are some
excellent.
consistent themes.
There's consistent themes in his movies. I mean, so many of them are about adultery and infidelity. He's obsessed with it. But I love the way that Crimes and Misdemeanors handles it, and so that's another one. And then, yeah,
Blue Jasmine. I mean, I really loved like Take the Money and Run, Bananas, even Sleeper, like a lot of those
yeah,
early movies. And then I want to say that you mentioned in another episode, the opening sequence to Manhattan is
hmm
just one of the most gorgeous. I rewatched it the other night. I didn't even get through the whole movie. I just watched like the first 10-15 minutes.
yeah.
But
Isn't that the
that
one with the Gershwin music?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's all
yeah.
black and white. It's just different clips of
hmm
around pretty much just Manhattan.
Yeah,
And wow, just I mean, if you want to have a quick 5 to 10 minute cinematic experience that will inspire you creatively
yeah.
and
hmm
visually, yeah, that's a great one. But oh yeah, because I guess that's just the thing is that I was kind of befuddled because I do like a lot of Woody Allen movies, but I didn't see why this one, But anyway, we've already that horse is already dead and in no further need of beating. And I don't know. We're up over an hour, so maybe we ought to
Okay.
let the people go. But before we go, I have some news to touch on that Danny, when she returns with our next episode, is going to have a little bit more detail. We've got some good news. The Utah FilmPod, the Utah.film website, we're putting together a Patreon account. And so you're going to be able to support our efforts and get some additional material, get access to additional material, including, I believe Danny said that it'll involve getting access to our new episodes earlier, among some other things we've got in mind. And Danny's going to go into a little bit more detail on that next time. So look forward to the new Patreon account. And in the meantime, if you haven't already given us a good positive rating on iTunes or on Spotify or on YouTube or wherever you are listening or now watching the Utah Film Pod, please take some time to do so. We'd love to get the great feedback. We'd love to build things up and widen our audience. And if you got any thoughts for us along the way, got any suggestions, we've talked about doing discussions about Westerns. And of course, this is the Utah Film Pod. So if there's something Utah related you'd like to hear about, please take the time to drop us a note. We'd love to hear from you. And in the meantime, maybe find something out there to see. There are a few options in the theaters right now, but just because it's the August and September doldrums doesn't mean there aren't good things to watch and see around. And we'd love to hear from you. So take care, and we'll catch you next time.